join. Even if that's not the case, I think we should go ahead. This was planned weeks ago. So we already have most of the people. I think people will join and go. That's normal. Anyways, okay. So we have another call also. Okay, let's begin. Okay, let's begin. So, good evening, everyone. Or let us say, I think, yeah, good evening, everyone. This is Abhivardhan. So we are in a committee session under the Research Ethics Committee. And in this session, first of all, we are grateful to all the stakeholders who are participating today. We will be discussing about the economic legal issues around the compute infrastructure invested to enable artificial intelligence solutions. Now, let me quickly introduce myself. I'm the chair of the session. So, my name is Abhivardhan. I'm the founder and chairperson of ISAIL, the Indian Society of AI and Law. We are an industry forum specifically focused on AI standardization efforts. In that regard, I'm also grateful to have the presence of Ayush Chandra, who's a quite capable cybersecurity law professional and is also chairing the Research Ethics Committee of the forum, where this committee specifically focuses on policy issues and policy requirements. So, in our standardization process, the larger aspect is to build standards and to see what policy inputs could be helpful from a stakeholder's viewpoint. But again, that's a larger comprehensive process. However, anything which is around policy and legal issues is something which this committee directly handles and at this time. So let us introduce our stakeholders for today and let's go ahead with the roundtable. I think people in the audience will be joining. I think that will uh, keep happening. Meanwhile, let me introduce who are here. So from stakeholders, we have Mr. Sreedhar Kosaraju, Dr. Hoda Al-Khzaimi, uh, and Shirsha Chaudhari. All of them are distinguished experts at the ISAIL Advisory Council. Sreedhar is from Andhra Pradesh IT sector. Dr. Hoda is a professor at NYU Abu Dhabi campus and also a part of World Economic Forum. Uh, Shirsha is a part of Thomson Reuters Labs Bengaluru. And Bogdan Grigorescu, who possibly would be joining today, is the vice president of the ISAIL Advisory Council and somebody who has been experienced about automation and the technical infrastructure of AI in Great Britain, that is UK. So these are the stakeholders. From the ICL Secretariat, we have Midutpal Bhattacharya, who's Chief Policy Advisor, joining today. And we have Malak Seth from the Research Ethics Committee. Happy to have all of you here. So Ayush, I'm passing the baton to you. I think, if you wish, you can begin with the introductions, or I can put some context as to why are we here for the topic. So up to you.
Uh,
Yeah.
it's great. You can lead from the front. I will jo- join with you on the same page.
Okay, appreciated. So, to begin with, why is this lesson important? Now, for someone who might not be aware about what is compute infrastructure and what's the whole reality around it, see, so you need compute infrastructure for enabling AI solutions because the processing capacity is high. There are companies like NVIDIA who are important stakeholders. Then there are cloud companies who are important stakeholders for offering the space to ensure computation. So server capacity, semiconductors, uh, processing capabilities and accuracies of large language models or any artificial intelligence model, all of these factors count. Now, in the case of the larger Indo-Pacific and the global South and even India otherwise, and even West Asia and other parts in Asia, what we see is that the compute infrastructure is being made available, but the kind of economic and legal issues which are associated with it are not properly understood or they are not properly represented in forums like the WTO and other ways. Because uh, the cost of computation is important to be observed. So I'll give a simple example as to why it is necessary for everyone to understand, although I'm pretty sure that our stakeholders are well aware of the complicated issues. For example, when we talk about companies like NVIDIA is a clear monopoly. It's a clear player in the semiconductor side, and it's quite doing well. It has some amazing technical achievements under the leadership, and there's no doubt about that. But when it comes to the market situation, what is observable is that NVIDIA itself is subjected to a situation where it is kind of not, it's kind of overpriced when it comes to its products and deliverables. And the overpricing issue is happening with compute infrastructure and other associated AI components wherever required. So overpricing also creates, of course, a scarcity problem, demand issue. That also creates a situation as to how an investor would be interested in AI, because even in India, an initial investment for AI would not be about just having a third-party chat GPT model and just link it with API and do it, right? Because again, those are wrappers technically, and yes, you can use them, but again, fine-tuning measures and others are also important. And then also at a larger level, there's an accessibility issue because these access policies of relevant servers or relevant integral deliverables. For example, a cloud company might be invested in a specific sector saying that, you know what, I can offer you something within a specific segment or sector, which could be deliverable for you. Now, that is fine. That's perfectly okay. But a situation of vendor lock-in may happen, where when you are being provided these deliverables, you may be in a situation that it becomes impossible for the beneficiary player to come out of that circle of deliverables by the cloud company and other stakeholders. That happens even in the case of OpenAI. Just recently, OpenAI has its own safe harbor policy with respect to offering LLMs, and it has been issuing its own notices when it launched the Orion 1 model recently to its own users, stating that uh, you have to pause your activities because it's a violation of something. But their safe harbor policy, as per their own bylaws, it's not clear. So the lack of clarity creates a confusion for research labs, startups, and even individuals who are running their projects and just trying to create a prototype. Because for all its flaws, the benefit of generative AI is that you can do some processing work as narrow AI and you can get some outcomes. I know a lot of startups in the I know startups in agriculture, DeepTech, and others who even have done this through generative AI, because everything does not have to be a B2C solution or a business to consumer solution. So in that regard, I think it's an interesting issue to be understood, and I think this roundtable may address those key issues at hand from the beginning. Uh, there are many discussion points which were posted for the session. However, we will steer it as an introductory session in a way that we address key economic, legal, and policy issues. We have stakeholders from various verticals. We try to accommodate cloud companies like V2E and others, but due to time and schedule issues, we could not accommodate them. Nevertheless, I think, as recommended by Shirsha and Dr. Roy in previous sessions also, we will have more such sessions in future as a follow-up on specific nuances which may be necessary. And I think we will also try to incorporate more stakeholders, including startups, wherever possible. Again, timelines clash, but that's the case. So Ayush, I think you may begin. I think you can ask every stakeholder to, I think we may begin with, so Ayush, I think you should add something before, we may ask stakeholders to.
Yeah. So thanks for the introductory brief data about the topic. So I want to put more insights into picture. So as you know, recently the semicon conductor industry, there was a semicon event which was launched in India in Greater Noida, maybe 10-20 days back, where there was a lot of news and a lot of partnerships which have uh, been being made through the government of India, and it was actually a big step for India in the semiconductor space. Seeing the recent changes where after the COVID-19 struck and the companies which were dependent on China and other countries, they are now slowly going back and they're kind of reconsidering their position on the semiconductor stage. And as per the recent news, it's been notified and published that many companies they're looking for India as a hub for the semiconductor space, whereas even Nivea and Apple, they're trying to get some understanding on the Indian market, on the manufacturing side and the semiconductor side, on how they can be able to utilize the Indian power under the Indian AI models and the Indian mission of AI, which is the current and a booming initiative under the government of India. So they are kind of doing it, and maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, we can see India becoming a semiconductor space where heavily most of the big tech companies heavily depending on their semiconductor requirements would definitely be utilizing Indian resources. And there are a lot of happenings which have been in the semiconductor space or even in the AI space with many companies who are planning to invest in India. In the month of October, I think there are new sessions where Nivea is also hosting an event in India where they will be launching and showcasing their AI models and giving the audience, basically the Indian public audience, to get their hands on experience on what Nvidia can build models in. And coming to the legal and ethical issues are India is still a very developing country, and we don't have so much of resources in terms of semiconductor or any other of these things. And with these developments, it's going to be a good state of affairs for Indian companies who are in-house developing all these AI models or LLM applications. And even some of them are partnering with NVIDIA and other technological semiconductor companies as well, only in the AI space. And with respect to the legal understanding, even the norms on AI and semiconductor, we don't have like a proper legislation or anything to back it forth. But seeing the current government dispensation, we can uh, foreseeably see that in the near term or in the near future, we'll have something on the semiconductor space or on an AI regulatory framework. So, yeah. So that was my basic introduction and some bits of sharing the important uh, development in AI space and semiconductor space in India. So we can now maybe move forward ahead, Abhivardhan.
All right, sure, sure, appreciate it. Okay, so let's begin. Uh, okay, let's have Dr. Hoda to share her insights first. Since we all, I mean, I think we would prefer, Dr. Hoda and Sreedhar to begin. So, because I think they are the newer entrants to these roundtables. No offense to anyone. And I think then we'll go on to Shirsha, and then I think we'll then go into discussion mode. Those who are joining, of course, can ask questions. They can like through. We also have Malvika Gupta from the Research Ethics Committee. So, Malvika, feel free to ask any questions if you have in the discussion mode. Of course, not right now. So, Dr. Hoda, you may share your initial views on this, maybe at 5 to 10 minutes, and then I think we may go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. I hope that you can see my slides.
Yes, it's visible. Yes.
Okay. So when it comes to the AI compute or AI infrastructure in general, we have to go with the mindset. I just would like to introduce myself first. I think Abhivardhan did a great job in like quick introduction. I run a center called Emertech that focuses on emerging and advanced research prototyping. I'm as well part of the World Economic Forum, leading and co-chairing a Center for Cybersecurity. And I'm an economic and technology advisor, as well as the associate vice provost for NYU Abu Dhabi. working on multiple aspects, and I'm part of the Faculty of Engineering in NYU. These are my contacts in case you wanted to ask me questions or WhatsApp me any kind of rapid fire of questions after the talk, because I know that we don't have time. When it comes to the construct of what is the economic value of AI kind of infrastructure, our point of view should go beyond just the normal regular compute stack, because it's not just an investment in the regular normal compute stack, it's an investment in sovereign kind of independency when you are building this infrastructure. And on the longer run, it's an investment on market monopoly and building futuristic foundational technologies, and as well as being a pioneering kind of entity, global entity, and producing a new generation energy generation kind of infrastructure that support the next generation of compute, which we don't see at the moment, regardless of what we have on the map. So it's Australian Strategic Policy Institute did this amazing landscape analysis of who is monopolizing what when it comes in critical technologies, and guess who topped 44 in high monopoly risks for those critical technologies, including AI, advanced materials, and computing and communication. USA and China were the top contenders. India was as well on the map on a few. So these are the generic views of the different, I would say, kind of infrastructures that gain fame on biotechnologies, advanced materials, semiconductors, and you could see that the net value of infrastructure kind of investment goes beyond billions. So I think on AI, China is investment above 200 billion USDs as we are speaking today in 2024, for a futuristic gain of over 7 trillion USDs from the net value of 19 trillions, which is quite of a high number. And then you could see on this global map that India is somehow contending with instituting these critical infrastructure with its stack of above 10 kind of value structures. But as well, when we look at this, investment on those technology means investments in tech sovereignty in general. And yes, we do have the tensions of this, because regardless of how much a country would spend on creating their technology stack, if they don't have access to market, or if they don't have access to pricing infrastructure that would as well encourage them to stay dominant in the sales of the market and in monopolizing, or at least protecting their market share in the future, it's a moot point from just starting the R&D and the investment structure. You could see at the moment that the US-China war trade tariffs, including the AI chip acts and the many ripple effects that comes out of this, goes beyond 550 billion USDs. And we know very sure, regardless of how many symposium you will have in October coming from NVIDIA to discuss the semiconductor development in India, we have multitudes of versions of those kind of semiconductors and chips that are being developed for AI infrastructures. And because of the export roles, you might end up not having the ultimate kind of technology developed to support your sovereign independence. Yes, we talked about this kind of global cut for AI kind of revenue. But as well, I want to focus on the fact that this investment is not just an investment in a growth of GDP of over 19 trillions. It's an investment in a growth of TFP, because it allows you to open new markets and economies. It allows you to create new cultures of innovations, a new paradigm and stack of innovation when you invest in AI compute. And as well, it allows you to surpass this kind of geopolitical kind of tensions that exist today. Okay? So the goal here is to make sure that we know that innovation ecosystems with a free flow of investment capital and acquisition to critical patents or critical intellectual property would lead to building this kind of AI stack, and would lead to building a new industries related to AI that looks beyond just the AI, because the ultimate goal for us is not to just focus on AI compute here, but the focus on what kind of additional technologies you can build upon that. So we had this kind of UNCTAD. They just generated this kind of report that says by 2025, which is next year, you would have almost 10x investments in parallel kind of fourth industrial revolution technologies, and AI is only one of them. So I hope that within our global race, we don't lose the sight of what matters the most, because our compute infrastructure, yes, it is essential for AI innovation, and it is projected to generate over 19 trillion by 2024, but it also means that we have to be much more granular in analyzing the necessary needs that we will have to prioritize in our investments that goes beyond just the data center, the cloud services, and the powerful computing infrastructure necessary. If you noticed in this graph, it shows you that the cost of compute infrastructure will go to above 2.2% GDP of annual cost GDP in mid 2026, and this is kind of catastrophic moment, which means that the cost of producing the technology might go above the cost of the US total GDP at a certain point of time. And when we talk about, again, the AI infrastructure, it's the whole stack of HPCs, TPUs, semiconductors that goes beyond the cost of 10,000 USD for small pilot projects for startups to 1 million for large scales one. So again, if we took the narrative and try to understand the jumps that we are having today and how fast are we living in accelerated mode, we would realize that in 2010, we had, like, before the era of deep learning, we have an amount of 21.3 months of producing AI models. And I'm talking about generic AI models and not just LLMs infrastructure. And today we're talking about 2 to 3 months in generating the same training capacities for generative AI models. And the cost is jumping from 50 million to 100 million plus USDs for training those models. NVIDIA with H100 performance, they are promising to have over 9 times faster training capacities and 30 times faster for inference capacity for AI models. We do have as well the Chinese model that is competitive to NVIDIA, and that is also producing above H100 and H200 kind of GPU infrastructure. We might have memory bottlenecks because for NVIDIA H1, it offers only 80 GB of memory through large AI models, which means that it would be rough and hard for us to push for those AI models to be on edge computing devices. And maybe we would rely most of the time on cloud computing infrastructure, which is what's happening now. And you could notice that over 70% of the new startups of AI are using these Google Clouds kind of services. So the growth on those computing costs, as we have said, it surpasses 100%, 11% per year for fabrication and 24% per year for design, which also opened our eyes to the fact that we need to invest in semiconductors market and infrastructure beyond the current kind of total market value of 1.4 trillion USDs. And in order to improve this, we need to look into the leading market shares across the globe and introduce new companies into this. I'm super happy to hear a few mentioning that India is trying to push for their semiconductor manufacturing capacities, which would be a great initiative to start with. I know very well that India has several governmental initiatives on this regard, that we would discuss some of them in a few minutes. Estimated future compute cost for 2037 will exceed the total US GDP, as we have said earlier. So again, the market size and growth of those compute costs is something of a particular interest of focus. We have to really understand what is the current training cost for those AI models. How are we viewing them in terms of a projected global compute spending for 2023, and what is the forecasted compute spending, for example, by 2026, which is around 288 billion USDs. Today, again, to the engineers in the room that are very well aware of the fact of the fact that every 18 months we are doubling the compatibility of our smart mobile infrastructure in terms of chips and improving the computational capacity of those. But in the same reality, we live in a reality that 3.4 months of compute is happening on AI infrastructure and would be improved into maybe 2 months into the spectrum, which would mean that we will have a faster algorithmic computational infrastructure than our hardware in a few bits of a time. And so we need to make sure that there is a balance in between the algorithmic computational infrastructure that exists over the cloud, and as well the edge computing devices infrastructure. So, and we have to optimize the future training cost for those AI model to be better than the cost that is being perceived at the moment at 1 billion USDs. So I'm not going to go through the licensing cost and AI research and development cost that goes beyond $500,000 to 10 million for annually for mid-size kind of companies that are working on AI, and they would still require training cost for their employees and upskilling cost for their employees when it comes to understanding the cost of this compute infrastructure. So once again, it's not just a silver bullet kind of analysis of this, because we need to look at the whole hierarchy of how much of graphic processing we will need, how much of FPGAs and TPUs, but at the same time, we have to look at the training cost and at the overhead of cost that is being introduced internationally through the economic inefficiencies that exist in a global competition, a global monopoly market, when it comes to the policy responses, for example, to AI compute that happened in between US and China. We know that the United States, for example, had the CHIP Act in 2022, which was ultimately aiming to promote domestic semiconductor production. It still have a high cost kind of challenges and a high reliance on the global manufacturing supply chain within TSMC. This is why we are having inefficiencies of 550 million losses when it comes to the sanction war. This year, for example, the United Kingdom is having over 100 million pounds invested in GPUs, and China having their AI semiconductor and export controls being emphasized in order to limit the impact of the sanctions over their state-of-art chips that they are developing. We see also the EU, specifically in France, creating for Gen Z a supercomputer, for example, with a faster academic and public AI research acceleration in mind. But when you look at the global AI distribution for compute resources by region, you could see that North America, for example, is having the mass of that. China is and Europe is the second contender. But these data that you see on the map is a bit biased because we don't know the truth of the data that's not being disclosed yet. But what's interesting here is to see that regardless of this kind of geopolitical tension that exists around the investment on AI compute, we still have a great interest in rebuilding the next new wave of AI compute. I don't know if how many of you are aware of the Eastern Data, Western Computing policy that China have initiated, which aim to relocate, and we have a small use case about it in a few, which aim to relocate data processing to renewable energy rich region in order to promote using a cloud computing infrastructure or computing infrastructure in general that are green within the manufacturing supply chain of those new infrastructure that's being developed. Also, under the Made in China 2025 initiative, we have over 44 critical AI infrastructure technologies. India has been launching last month their supercomputer centers, starting with almost 72 GPUs that are pertaining to AI demands, providing them to the public. Again, these are few numbers on the basic AI compute cost and how these GPU intensive workloads pricing that goes beyond 20 to 50 dollars per hour are not reasonable for the longer run, and we will see a decrease on this kind of cost. And we should also analyze that 80% of the global compute infrastructure is concentrated in developed region. We should do something to make sure that we don't end up with developing regions versus deployment region or consuming regions. Markets like Southeast Asia and India have to make sure that they build a balanced R&D infrastructure, balanced science and technology infrastructure, and a holistic stack infrastructure, not just AI infrastructure, in order to build for transformative impact. Also, we don't need to forget about the software side, but the most critical side of the whole infrastructure aspect. It's not just about the hardware or the software, it's about the people. How do you transform the jobs? How do you reskill the initiatives, build reskilling initiatives across the map, and how you do create new economies around these jobs in order to build leaders in workforce reskilling globally. So we've seen recently that the economic value does not exist just by acquiring the manufacturing supply chain infrastructure, but also by acquiring stake at the application layer, at the layer of building these use cases for the mass. Again, there is a huge move, as we said earlier, to move data centers with restricted energy demands. That is projected to consume, for example, data centers are projected to consume 8% of global electricity by 2030. Data centers must shift to clean energy. So we have new corporate renewable commitments where Google and Microsoft pledge 100% renewable energy for their global data center by 2030. The Nordic countries, for example, have shown leadership in utilizing geothermal and hydropower kind of solutions for their to reduce carbon emissions from their data centers by 40 to 50%. Again, the transition aspect is something that is very much well studied across those kind of uneven infrastructure access. But also we have to be careful about when we are highlighting the ethical components of AI compute infrastructure development, we should emphasize on the point that we shouldn't build for unequitable economic structures where uneven access to this infrastructure through that would create compute divide and highlight disparities of those infrastructures would exist. We shouldn't also build for concentration of compute resources where, as I said, 80% of those resources existing in developed societies. And also we should make sure that challenges in Africa, Southeast Asia are being magnified, prioritized across these kind of AI power that we are building, and the impact on the startups and innovation sectors are being as well considered. So it's beyond just building for these amazing global regulatory frameworks, because again, when it comes to regulation, it's not one size fits all. Every region have to also compete and excel in building their own regulation that is holistic, that's not just risk based, but also value based and principle based in order to prioritize people with technology and not just technology excellence across the map, and to promote transparency, to promote global cooperation when it comes to AI development. Because one of the major recommendations that we could put in the map when we are talking about shaping a global AI ecosystem is we need for a global infrastructure fund. We need for this a global infrastructure corridor that would ultimately prioritize building AI infrastructure or supply chain across different regions to avoid disparities, creating regions of disparities when it comes to creating these technology, and as well develop AI specific energy strategies and initiatives, because we're not prioritizing them first and we are just following the trend of what's being developed currently on the top developed, for example, without mentioning few names, but semiconductors kind of communities or organizations. And the map here is to develop a next level of competition when it comes to promoting for new types of innovation, new types of, for example, battery generations or battery sources that would support AI infrastructure that are clean, create international AI talent exchange programs, for example, across those regions in order to make sure that we implement a holistic 360 AI infrastructure development that goes beyond just the ethics review boards, but also AI readiness structures, check and evaluations structures, and establishing international standards of collaboration, and also creating innovative zones that are meant to develop those AI compute infrastructures across the map. As well, there are a few other recommendations around cybersecurity, about public-private partnerships, fostering across different ecosystems, and about building democratized access for those resources, and investing in clean energy. I've mentioned earlier that we will be able to look a little bit into China Eastern Western data computing policy, which is ultimately was prioritizing developing data processing in regions that are rich in renewable energy, and optimize in order to optimize the new efficiencies around building a cleaner cloud computing infrastructure, or in general computing infrastructure. And this would lead maybe to ultimately futuristic cost reduction on those infrastructure. We visited a few of them in Yipin and other parts of China, and it would be very interesting to replicate this model and to see how can we scale up when it comes to building these infrastructures. So I'm not gonna go beyond this. I think I'll leave it to the wider audience of stakeholders to discuss and analyze how can we build and foster for a thriving ecosystem when it comes to AI computes. Thank you.
Yeah, great. I think this is a good and solid introduction to begin with, and I think a lot of perspectives can be added up. Uh, I think while we will discuss about Semicon India's achievements, we should discuss about the recent uh, Chinese approach as well. There are a lot of interesting things around, so I think the discussion will also be around that. Uh, I also found instances of discussion, instances raised about the kind of market uncertainty created and the legal uncertainty around
Yeah.
certain contractual practices and how it could affect. So I think this is a great beginning. So Ayush, I think we should. So I think Sreedhar, I think if yeah, Ayush, you can add quickly. I think then we have Sreedhar to add his initial insights.
Yeah,
Sure.
great. Thank you for your insights.
Thank you,
I would
Ayush.
now request Sreedhar to speak about on the topic. If he has any questions or he wants to share any points, he may feel free to do so.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. And first of all, Ayush and Abhivardhan, thank you so much bringing the right topic in a very relevant time. And thank you, Dr. Hoda, for a very detailed insight. I think you have covered almost every point. And I have a small question. Particularly, I would like to talk more on the startups and SMEs, particularly MSMEs. So, like if you look at in the recent past, Government of India has brought a lot of policies and schemes for startups, So there is a lot of buzz on AI and a lot of startups working and on AI related, work. I mean, as part of their products and all. But still, if you look at the compute infrastructure is very costly for these startups. So what would you recommend, particularly for the governments, like to reduce this compute infrastructure? In what way they can actually bring down this compute infrastructure? Particularly for the startups, and what kind of collaborations they can bring it. And now they've been actually focusing only on the IITs and all. They've been funding only the cream institutes of India. But what is the role of corporates? What do you recommend how corporates actually can pitch in and can make this particular entire compute infrastructure available for the startups? So that's the question. So what is your take on it?
Around this.
Yes.
Totally agreed. Totally agreed. Sreedhar, I think you can add your points once, I think, if you wish to on anything. But in case if you wish to do that in discussion mode, maybe we'll have Shirsha have her interventions as well.
Sure.
Quickly, then the questions will keep popping up in the chat. So, folks, you can ask questions for sure in the chat. And Shirsha, you may have your intervention. Yeah. Hi, Shirsha. You can unmute yourself. You can hear us. I think she'll circle back maybe to some technical issues.
No issues.
Yeah, I think that happens. Unfortunately, that is what MS Teams is a lot popular.
No issues. No issues.
So we'll move to Malak. Malak, if you have any points or any views on it, please feel to
Yeah.
share.
Yeah, same for Malvika. So Malvika is pursuing PhD in cybersecurity law, and Malak is also somebody quite young in technology law. So they are committee members. Prabhat, we'll add you as well. I think he's not here yet, but yeah, I think he wants. So I think until Shirsha joins in, if you have any questions at hand, or any questions, because I think the idea is to have good questions. I think they could be a lot helpful in my view. I think Bogdan might be joining soon. So finally, this technical issue is solved from his end. I don't have any. Okay, understood.
Malvika, can we have your points, please? Malvika, can you hear us?
Yeah, you can unmute yourself. Yeah.
I think you are on mute, Abhivardhan sir. You're on mute.
Oh, thank you. So, uh, meanwhile, I think Malvika, you can unmute yourself if you have anything to add or any questions. I think the idea of this roundtable is to, of course, see and raise questions. I think that works a lot. Meanwhile, Sreedhar, I think if you wish to have any of your own detailed intervention, if you have something until Shirsha joins back, problem comes in, you can feel free to do that. I think we started with you questioning, which is fine. But if you have something specific also to share, something, you can feel free to do that. But I think we should discuss about China a little bit, maybe. But I think, up to you.
On
Right.
this point, on this point, so first apologies I've been late. It is my fault, but also the tech just didn't notify me. I had last minute changes and I could join just about in time, wasn't notified, forgot about it. I'm not making excuses, it happens. That just about the fault of the public clouds. Yeah, that's a public cloud in action right there. Anything that runs on a public cloud will essentially be a corporate behind it, because all the data that goes into that infrastructure will not be in the appropriate control of the data subject or the company that runs it. The real control is with the entity that owns the infrastructure. And that's going to be the entity that has the rights over the cloud. So even that startups, of course, they have to make first having income, generate income, which is not going to happen fast. It's a misunderstanding that the public cloud would going to help them more than other type of solution. Not anymore. It used to be, not anymore. Reason for that is following. The public cloud actually more expensive now than prem. Is more expensive now in data center that you can run on SWD software, network as a service, essentially, where you own the infrastructure but you don't own the location. So that's gotten a lot cheaper compared to the public cloud, but you get the appropriate control over your assets, data, bare metal, everything that you put on there. The other thing is the public clouds always give credits. Good for them that they do that. They are very generous on giving credits to startups, SMEs, and so on. Was a very good model until in the last few years when it got expensive, because those SMEs and startups get locked in, right? You're going there, you start developing, proving your ideas, pitching to investors, start getting investments. You build things on those credits. So it becomes actually difficult and pretty expensive to get out when you have an MVP, right? So you're kind of locked in. Yeah, so that's a problem right there. Now, locked in can happen on premise, obviously, but you control the assets. To give you an example of how expensive a public cloud has become, and it didn't used to be like that. When you deploy typically, let's say, a very average VM, on, I don't know, Linux, doesn't matter, OS pretty much doesn't matter. It costs between 200 and 250 pounds in UK pounds, okay, per month. Yeah. Okay. Now do that amortization over, say, 3 years lifespan. Compare to a hardware, including firewalls, including all the licenses, everything, over the 3 years. And you're getting to just about double the price, more or less. Okay, yeah. This is one example. It's not linear. So I think it's actually unaffordable for small companies anymore by comparison. Now, the question is how a small company can into on-prem, because, it's not really a good idea to start, having important space reserved and rented out in DCs and paying all those licenses. True. However, Equinix, few other companies do that where you have it like a service. You do have to buy the bare metal. That's not expensive anymore. You're not going to deploy masses of GPUs, right? Right. You're not going to deploy, heck, you're not even going to deploy 20 GPUs at the beginning when you prove your idea. I think even 2 are enough. It's not such a big sum. And then you own them. And they will be good for usage in 1 year time, or even in 2 years time, because you're at the beginning. You're not cutting edge. You can't be cutting edge, right? So and also the pricing model of the cloud is pretty complex and complicated.
Very complex.
You're not gonna get transparency into that. You have to really understand hands-on how all that compute works on the cloud to understand what you are paying for. Is it a good idea or not? Is not easy. It's not easy at all. It should be fairly easy, but it's not. Yeah. So, but on the other hand, if you have that, it is pretty powerful for sure. Cloud have very good mechanisms on that, but you have to understand the price model. And when you deploy AI models on the public cloud, God help you. God help you
Yeah.
with the pricing model. It really gets so complicated because of the feedback loops, because of various entities that are involved, which are not really forthcoming at all. For
Yes.
example, you are on Azure, okay, and you use Copilot. Well, what Copilot? Is it Microsoft Copilot? Is it Azure OpenAI? Is it your OpenAI ChatGPT? The tech is the same, the ownership is vastly different, fundamentally different, and so is the pricing.
Yes.
So it really gets complicated. My question to you, is it worth going there as a startup if you need to dedicate a lot of resources and effort just to understand the pricing model? That's the comment yeah, and then there are considerations about security and so on, but we assume that you have the technical prowess and the right people to
Yeah.
get it there. But when it comes to pricing, really ask yourself, please, is it worth it?
Yeah.
Yep.
True. Very true. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I'm in London, in UK. I know what
Okay.
you're talking about, and I think
Yes.
to your point, yeah, I think that's a way forward. But you need an innovative leadership in government for that.
Yeah,
The
for
kind
sure.
of, by the way, this is not a commercial of the UAE government. I think they are very innovative. I think they have a very long vision. If you look what they're doing and been doing it for quite a few years now, but also in Qatar as well. And I think that whole region, the Arabic Peninsula, goes pretty much the same path, which is long-term vision, very technological. They do understand the technology more than other governments. My personal opinion, by the way, right? Okay, and they're doing things. They are putting the money to work. They are putting the money to work, and they are not following same old patterns and models that, frankly, are not suitable anymore because things just changed.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Totally agree.
Shirsha, have
Uh,
a question, right?
yeah, I was thinking. Yeah, Shirsha, please. Yeah.
Is this working now? I think I was having some
Yes.
challenge.
Please go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I actually kind of researched the topic, Abhivardhan, that you had shared, and I find myself at a situation where a lot of the points that I was looking to share is actually maybe expressed in a different form and fashion by both Professor Bogdan as well as Dr. Hoda. I did one assignment. So with the topic itself, right? When you look at the compute needed for generative AI, or really just for AI itself, what I tried to do is to break down the compute, the definition of the compute, and break that down in two ways, right? One is what is its current status quo? What do we mean by the compute? It's a stack, right? There are across the across the entire vertical many aspects to it. It's not only the hardware and the chip, but it's also the software required to operate it, and then of course the mass availability and the cloud and the data center operations of it, the operations of software built over it, as well as enabling the application layer usage itself to the general public. So if you look at this entire stack itself and you try to break down the economics of it and way things are today, right? And then the other dimension that you want to look at with this vertical stack itself is the supply chain. And so when you look at the supply chain of every aspect of this vertical, you want to, maybe look at, you know, the various aspects of where we are today, but also how did we reach here? Because then that indicates maybe a future path as well, right? And I want to cross that, create a cross product of that, supply chain and that vertical stack of the compute itself with what resources we have. And here is where I think, it is very complementary to what Dr. Hoda was saying. What are resources across different societies and different countries which we want to leverage and enable in the direction of that supply chain? But not just that, but also to create a more equal world. It's easier said than done. And, quite frankly, like, people have said already, that we are missing today some imaginative leadership to enable this and to empower people to be able to do this. And I think that the aspect that we are missing from governments and leadership is basically to regulate. By regulate, I want to be careful. I don't mean stifle the innovation, right? By no means, but make it a more equitable society. Make it give roles and responsibilities uh, to large corporates as well as to the different mass voices that we have in our society, which should actually go into shaping the AI, right? This the great AI that the different corporates in the powerful geographies that are getting built is, after all, going to be used by the masses. If it's going to be used by the masses and is supposed to be meaningful for the masses, then let's ensure that the role played by different, participants in the society are then emphasized and, spotlighted, right? And, there are different aspects brought into power then. So, if I double down and look internally, look at what our country, that is India, kind of has the power here on. It is with respect to the number of it is with respect to the number of engineering colleges and the number of tech talent that we produce in our country. And why can't we also harmonize that towards the supply chain that we referred to earlier? Why can't we mobilize the masses that we have to create platforms which allow us to use our manpower, to use our masses, to enable creation of better AI, right? It's not going to be useful if the AI is solving only PhD level papers, but also being useful to the society that we live in, right? And that can only happen if we are able to connect these dots. And I think we're missing today. That's a gap. That's a gap, and that's a gap which could be fulfilled in numerous ways by either by enabling us to play a greater role in the supply chain aspect of that vertical stack that I referred, but also looking at where this is then headed and starting already to create skill sets in that direction. And I know we referred to corporates having a role. I think it was Sreedhar who mentioned that like corporate social responsibility or corporate startup responsibility, but maybe there's more to defining what CSR is and what role it could play in this. However, what's the trigger? Like where do we start? I think that the economics of it all will be driven by where it starts, and it need not necessarily remain there, but we have a role to play. I think we have a responsibility as well.
Yeah, I think we would appreciate that. And once an outcome document is out and once this is out, I think we will consider something about it. Because just to quickly add, I have been patiently, been open to have every stakeholder put their views in. So I think from an observational viewpoint, of course, uh, a fourth version of AI Act.in will come in November. At least I'm giving the deadline to myself now. So I think a lot is what happens is that a lot is about solutionism as a culture versus maintenance and fostering better collaborative approaches as a culture. And I think we need to review that for sure to add on. And I think it could be a lot helpful and productive. It's because even from a legislative point of view, it would depend upon certain realities. For example, I came across this graph where it is being stated that model weights of LLMs should decide how high risk AI should be. Right? This is the Biden admin's executive order and the European Union AI Act. The problem with that approach is it doesn't work in the long run or eventually in the short run because they are focusing on very, very limited models Again, even if they are general purpose AI, their use cases are so unstable that we don't even know how much they're viable, what the technical approach. The benchmarks are also flawed. I think Bogdan would be more than happy to add. But yeah, I think we still have 18 to 15 to 18 minutes. And yeah, we are open to questions by the committee members and people who are in the chat. Um, Anyways, I think the outcome document will be fantastic for sure. And a YouTube video will always be there for this session as well. We'll post it on the Bharat Pacific. But we're open to take questions at this moment. Uh, and Malvika, Malak, if you have any points, please feel free to. Uh, uh, so I think uh, that's of course there. So I think we have enough time still. We can discuss some aspects. So Ayush, would you like to address maybe the remaining questions in a way that we can club it up? What do you think? Maybe I think you could have some interventions. We still have 15
Yeah,
minutes.
that's going to be great. So we can sum it up.
And to me, this is what will establish the toolbox of AI between these different jurisdictions.
I would say, unfortunately, it's not going to happen unless automation and data is in the national curriculum. Just most people just don't understand automation and don't understand the basics of data. The basics, they just
But
don't.
I think it depends on the region. I don't want to generalize.
I think UAE is and Qatar is, they are doing the right things. There you go. Here, I didn't know about that. So, thank you very much for enlightening me, because in the West, that does not happen yet. And that's a huge problem of not being educated. This is a very serious example from the legal domain recently. One of the, seems like a very prominent lawyer, yeah, is very happy about ChatGPT, using it in the legal domain in doing stuff, like lots of stuff. Okay. So the question that I ask him, everybody should ask these guys, these optimistics, that do you disclose to your clients that your lawyering is using automated systems that not even the developers understand fully? Because that's what it is. They declare that openly. The developers of generative AI models do not actually understand enough about what they're doing. And why they said that is because of, well, model collapse, the so-called hallucination, but not the regular that you have, those that are really damaging. Okay, they happen on a regular basis. They have no clue because they can't, because the architecture dictates that unexplainability. They are not explainable. It's not like you have a degree of explainability. It's zero. Please understand that it's zero. And then you apply to a legal domain and you wreck the people's life 50 years into the future, like a nuclear bomb, like Hiroshima, but only 1,000 times probably worse. So these kind of people, they don't understand the automation. That's what I'm talking about. If it's from the 7-year-old, that's exactly what should happen, on par with arithmetics and reading and writing. Immediately after, obviously, not in the same time. Yeah, you have to know to read and write first. In simple terms, what is a feedback loop? Why automated systems are all based on feedback loop, and why the feedback loop is the single most important aspect of any automated system, including life forms. You breathe, that's a feedback loop right there. And that's why, if that's not done, we're not going to have the right laws, we're not going to have the right practices, and we continue to have sinking standards and super rubbish software.
I agree. Totally.
Right. Yeah. Just to add quickly, since Dr. Hoda mentioned about the need to study districts and places. So just to quickly add on an Indian perspective. So what happens these days is that, so this was a crazy plan. So data scraping is a very common practice in Gen AI these days. We were actually thinking of analyzing this issue. So yeah, we were thinking of analyzing this issue, that if every district, according to media and regulatory sources, whatever it is, it's being claimed that AI related work is happening, then I think we need to monitor and at least see as to the efficacy of something. For example, you're involving AI in primary education in Madhya Pradesh in India, like Indore or Bhopal, some city, or you're using AI in Hyderabad for some sort of research in certain sector. Is there any 6 month consequence of it, 8 month consequence of it? Because I think that there are districts of strategic value. Investment is not limited to tier 1, tier 2 cities in India anymore. It's not limited to Bengaluru or Delhi. You don't need to stay there. You can also do it in tier 3 cities. There are agriculture related startups. There are other startups who actually are working in a very different way. They're handling their server issues, compute issues, but they are working very hard on it. I think that that's exactly what relatively I said in the G20 movies of Startup 20, that the problem we are facing is that our AI strategies are very obsessed with a cycling approach of regulating before even understanding as to what we should do at a pre-regulatory level, what we should govern and why. And sometimes there could be substandard use cases and everything. Uh, but yeah, so that's my take. But I think in the outcome document we'll have so many interesting inputs. We have an interesting person to intervene, Mr. Rajesh Sharma. So we have a few minutes, but I think not more than 3 minutes. So Mr. Rajay, if you would like to intervene at some points quickly, maybe we'd be happy to have you. But yeah, I think we have a little time left. So again, it was great intervention, but we appreciate it.
Thank you, Abhivardhan. And sorry, I was late in the program, but whatever I could hear was meaningful. And I agree with Bogdan that it is very important for us to have the AI as a part of the curriculum so that people understand what are the pros and the cons of using. Since I'm from the legal field, yes, there are many lawyers who are trying to use the AI, but they still don't know how to use it. And as the hallucination is a popular word in the legal world, they need to understand that they have to use it with caution. So I am happy, Abhivardhan, especially from your initiatives, what you are doing. I go through your post very deeply, read all your documents which you submit. So I'm happy that somebody is taking such a deep interest in AI, especially from the regulatory point of view. Good luck to you and good luck to the team here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I think this marks a conclusion, Ayush, I think. And yeah, apologies for the minor disturbance. Yeah, so to conclude quickly, I'll just say that it's been a delightful session, and I think we'll have some interesting feedback points and insights to come in through. Just to end this session, we'll just have a headshot to commemorate the presence of all our stakeholders. And yeah, have all of you. Also grateful for the presence of the committee members. So I think we'll have more such sessions in future depending on mutual availability. And the idea is to build standards. While that is something for startups and research that we do at the R&D committee, but this committee is special because it is the place for policy interventions. So we'll see how it goes. A new AI Act version will come from my end as well. But I think we should focus on strategic locations, which reminds me of so many things popping up. So, and Ayush, thank you so much for sharing this session. You tried your best well. I hope all of us will agree that Ayush actually intervened at his best score. Appreciate that. And I think interventions from all the stakeholders were great, especially Dr. Hoda. I think it was the first time, even Sreedhar's, it was first time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have more such discussions. We have more such important discourses. And I think we go. And Shirsha also, thank you so much for joining. Bogdan, thank you for
Thank you.
joining a little bit. Okay. Yeah, it was a pleasure for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
all.
Thank you, everyone.
you.
Take care.
Bye.
For the
Thank
best.
you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.